when you're able to attract and retain clients, you fortunately or unfortunately have to begin thinking about building a team.
I want somebody that is curious, constantly looking at, well, how do I just take this and tackle it?
There's a big difference between working in a financial advising firm and owning one.
There is still that question in the back of your mind of who's going to carry this business forward when I exit.
Welcome to the Total Succession Show. I'm your host, Tyson Ray, joined by Kim Kokenauer. We're glad you're here. Subscribe at totalsuccession.com/podcast and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. Today's conversation just might be the nudge you need to start preparing for what's next.
The way we coach advisors to think about succession, it's really to think about it from the perspective that there's not a termination date to think about, but I call it a freedom date. What's the date that you want to circle on the calendar that you are prepared, that your team is prepared, your clients are prepared, and it gives you the total freedom to choose a role on the team with a set of responsibilities, knowing that the clients can be cared for, even if you're not first chair advisor, that the business can grow, even if you're not its primary rainmaker, that you've got a good set of leaders who understand how to run the business and to think strategically and know how to take risk and how to invest wisely. And so we think of it as a freedom date. What is that date on the calendar? In 5 years, if you've got more than 5 years to your freedom date, then there are a different set of activities that you can think about. You probably have a little longer runway to build a team, to test and learn, to transition client relationships, to build a bench of lead advisors. And for those who have less than 5 years, it's probably going to be a different set of decisions. You're either going to need to do some acqui-hire or some serious recruiting of talent into your organization if you don't have it already. You can't microwave the process. And I remember my good friend Mark Tibersian, who's been a mentor of mine for a very long time, almost 2 decades now, said to me many, many years ago, and I think it was a wise statement, it takes about 5 to 7 years to successfully develop the next generation. And the sign of every great leader is somebody who can develop somebody who can develop somebody. And so if you've got less than 5 years, you may be running out of runway. Now, if you've got less than 5 years, but you've had, a team of, 3 or 4 or 5 people working with you for 8 to 10 years or more, well, you can accelerate the process. You've got to do it with intention. But if you don't have that kind of team, then you got to probably consider some off-ramp and some other opportunities. The other thing Mark taught me that has shifted for me a bit, it used to be, he would say to me, that it takes 2 to 3 to replace a controlling owner-founder. And I think that was true back in the day. In today's state, I think it's at least 3 or more. And the reason is these businesses have gotten more complex. The services provided to the clients have expanded. The needs of the clients are growing. The ability to connect with next generation requires a different type of advisor. So, when it comes to financial management, running the P&L and running the books and making decisions as a leader, the compliance oversight is more, not less. The technology stack, is more complicated. It's more, not less. The operations flow, all of it just requires, I think, a bigger team, more people. And that's the unintended consequence with success. When you're able to attract and retain clients, you fortunately or unfortunately have to begin thinking about building a team.
Like Tyson, you probably have a lot you can agree with, because I've heard you over the last 5+ years working together, talking through the pains of planning and growing a team to replace you.
Yeah. And then the fact that, it takes 5 to 7 years to develop that next leader once you actually have the right person to develop, because then there's a little bit of a runway there because you might not hire perfectly every time. And in fact, some of you if you're listening to this, you might have had the wound of you hired the wrong person. And so you just don't want to do it again. Or you're listening to this and you're asking yourself, it's the constant burden of the urgent crowds out the important. Meaning you're so focused on the client, the day-to-day, and the next appointment, and the next prospect, and the growing it, that time just flies by. and you're waking up, and the more you put off, because part of succession, if you want to die at your desk, is making sure you're retaining that next generation. And part of that comes with succession, ownership, skin in the game, retention opportunities for these people to feel like they want to be invested in it. But if you don't have that conversation early, I can think of a top advisor that Ray, we both know, that I just won't name, but he went to go, yep, I'm going to start selling this to my team, because that was his plan in the back of his head. He never told the team that. And then when he went to the team, they didn't want to buy it for what it had been growing, because they felt like they were part of it. And just these conflicts, it's like relationships. It's all about expectations, and the more you start communicating that, and more you start working towards that as part of the success criteria of your business, the more successful your business can be, and you can exit on your terms, whatever those are.
Just like everybody, you start out with yourself, you get your first person, you build, from there, and you try to have your time be in only your unique abilities, and then add people as you go. And so one of the things that became very apparent as we became more successful, and trying to create more professionalism and develop the team, so that if something happened to me, which does get asked a lot, when you get a few gray hairs, like what happens if you're get hit by the a beer truck or something, then we started slowly adding some of my team members, the key team members, as partners. And over the course of years, I ended up with 3 other partners in a minority ownership state. But, the basic reason behind that is there's a big difference between working in a financial advising firm and owning one. And I think the more your really key people, the ones that are going to be around for a long time, and ultimately, if something were to happen, the ones that continue, the sooner they can understand that other role, that other hat that you might have to put on, the more valuable they are to the firm. But then they're, kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's a little bit more carefully. And so that's worked out really well. We did it slowly over time. And very happy I did that, when we got started.
So I built this framework, or just kind of thought through this acronym, kind of came to me when you're starting to think about succession, and it's the word space.
Yeah.
A lot of times in life, you got to make space to even start beginning to think. But it stands for seeing, right? Seeing what the future looks like. I think the advisors are really bad sometimes at doing their own financial planning or exit planning or thinking of the future, because they're so focused on their clients. So it's seeing what's out there, seeing what's possible. Then it's identifying, therefore, what the plan is, then doing the preparation that's required. Again, in the idea of being of what a succession would look like. Then you get into you actually now need to act on some things. Then you have to commit to some things, especially in the phase where if you've now made a change and you've turned it over to junior advisors internally, or you did some type of outside third party sale. And then in the end, you get to exit, and that may be exiting from things you don't like. It doesn't mean you have to exit your career. You can exit into your passions and your unique abilities, or it could be exit into retirement, as the world may define it.
How you're going to exit is part of your strategy, overall business strategy. That's really going to ensure you're putting more of that money in your pocket than letting the buyer get that from you.
What's your encouragement to advisors in that 2-year time frame if they've not really done that to de-risk that? How do you kind of walk them through that?
Yeah, and de-risking is a major concept that I think people need to understand, and definitely owner dependency. We see it in a lot of industries. We see it a lot in wealth management. I just talked to a couple months ago, probably a $2 billion AUM firm that you can tell the founder is the massively responsible for the large part of the growth. If you take him out, that business is nowhere near what it's currently doing. And I think they realized that, right? And said, okay, hey, we need to take some time and do this. What do? I think number one, you start to think about during that 2 years, how is it that I want to exit? Because how you set up the firm during that time is a little bit dependent on how you want to exit. Are you going to transition internally? Are you going to sell to private equity, to an aggregator? Do you have somebody else in mind, right? How you set that up is going to depend a little bit there. But the introduction of more of a team approach is a big thing in this industry, right? The more that you can get other people in the firm involved, whether that's somebody directly being a lead advisor for clients or just releasing some touch points, having more of a junior advisor. There's different steps depending on where you are and where you want to get to that you can introduce, but certainly you don't want them to say, hey, I call Bob. You want them to say, I call AVC Wealth Managers, right? Because that second firm has a lot more value than the first, because if they're only calling Bob and Bob's no longer there, then I'm going to my neighbor or somebody else. I think we're at a time in this industry now where there are a lot of advisors, right? I think, 30 years ago, hey, I know an advisor. That's good. That's great. Now I think everybody knows multiple. And so what are you doing as an advisor to separate yourself, which is a whole category, but also to ensure that your business and your clients are taken care of after you step back, after you exit, whatever that piece is.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think a lot of advisors are kind of realizing that part of their exit is actually improving their valuation and actually building a firm that's sustainable. And so part of that is important. You kind of mentioned this is like, what is that next gen readiness? If you're not even really looking forward to selling soon, there is still that question in the back of your mind of who's going to carry this business forward when I exit.
Just because somebody is really good at what they do does not necessarily mean that they're going to make for a great leader. One of the examples I will give is I've seen this happen before where you have maybe an advisor that is great at, let's just call it selling, great at prospecting. They're killing it with new business. And you're looking at it from a financial impact being like, wow, this person's really good. They're just rocking and rolling every day. They're not afraid to take chances, to take risk, and they're closing business left and right. Then you put them into a leadership role just because they're excelling in their individual role and things fall apart. Maybe they don't have the mind or eye for detail. Maybe they are too supercharged. Maybe they have unrealistic expectations of others based on their own drive and abilities. So those are things that I would just be very cautious on. Don't get excited about somebody's, call it evolvement or escalation in your company just because they're good at one thing. That means they're rocking and rolling there, and reward them by all means. That's great. But it doesn't mean they're a great leader. So that kind of backs me into a couple things that I look for. You could go with the obvious as far as drive and capability, but really what I'm looking for is two key things. And that is, number one, I want somebody that is an empath. If you do not have the empathy gene and you cannot, again, meet people where they are or really try to truly understand kind of the underlying root cause of why people behave the way they do, why they make decisions the way they do, you're going to have a really hard time being an effective leader. Number two is self-starter. I want somebody that is curious, that is constantly looking at, well, how do I just take this and tackle it? I would rather have somebody screw up tenfold on a project, but having them take the initiative to try to get it done and to be resourceful than somebody who's like, here, Brittany, here's a 25-step process that I've laid out. What do you think? It's like, well, I can tell you what the end result looks like, but I don't really care how you get it done. So I want somebody that's going to go out there, that's going to take the bull by the horns, and that's really going to be a resourceful person. So I think, again, there's probably 30 different characteristics we could talk about, but those two, that empathy and that resourceful drive, I think that is truly what makes for an effective leader.
And as I'm listening to this, I'm speaking to the industry answer that the effective leader, or that the next person to take it over, isn't so much the rainmaker as much as a caretaker. Because you have an existing clientele, you have existing client relationships, you have existing team members, and with that empathy, they get the rainmaker is so focused on growing, they don't necessarily take care of what's already there. And the other part of it is the other thing I've learned, and we learned it also. I believe we also learned this from you, Brittany, is that it's sometimes thinking in terms of having that next leader not be conflicted with actual clients. So when that team member needs the leader doesn't have to say, excuse me, I have to jump on this call because I have this significant client problem I have to deal with, versus I can just focus on the team and what the team needs for the team to thrive and then care for the client, which is so counterintuitive. But that's where we really had the explosion in the team and the growth and the impact, is because the leader wasn't conflicted with the business.
These conversations are designed to support your next move, however close or far it may be. Tap subscribe and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. I've wrestled with these things myself, and that's exactly why I created something to help you do it with less stress and more direction. My book, Total Succession, is now available on Amazon. Inside, I break the process down into 5 clear steps to help you exit on your terms with confidence, full compensation, and your client's best interests at heart. You can also visit totalsuccession.com/podcast to download a free starter guide that walks you through my SPACE framework: see, prepare, act, commit, exit. Remember, you only exit your business once. Create the space to do it well. Thanks for listening. Until next time.